The Boy in the Fog, The Unsolved Mystery of Julian Thorne, by Alara Vance. Investigative feature, October 14th, 2024. Case file 09-2009-X. See location, Oak Haven, Oregon. Status reopened. Part 1. The Champagne Toast. In Oak Haven, the fog doesn't just roll in, it claims things. It is a living, breathing entity that swallows the jagged coastline, muffles the mournful cry of the foghorns, and on the night of November 14th, 2009, it swallowed Julian Thorne whole. To understand the disappearance, you have to understand the man. Julian was Oak Haven's golden boy, the kind of local celebrity that small towns pin their dying hopes upon. At 26, he was a prodigy architect with a vision that extended far beyond the rotting timber of the town's fishing wharves. He had just secured a multi-million-dollar contract to renovate the historic Oak Haven lighthouse, a project intended to revitalize the town's crumbling tourism industry. He was handsome in that sharp, classic way that looks good in black and white photos, high cheekbones, restless eyes, and he was undeniably, unapologetically rich. That Saturday night was his engagement party. He was set to marry Clara Halloway, the daughter of the town's mayor. It was the social event of the decade, held at the Thorne family estate. The Spire, a Gothic revival mansion perched precariously on the edge of the Whispering Cliffs. The house itself seemed to disapprove of the festivities, its dark windows staring out into the white nothingness of the ocean mist. According to 50 witnesses, including half the town council, Julian raised a crystal flute of vintage champagne at 8:45 p.m. The room hushed. He thanked his guests, his voice steady and warm. He kissed Clara on the forehead, a tender, lingering gesture that would be dissected by gossips for years to come, and whispered something that made her laugh. A secret, a promise. At 9 p.m., the tone shifted. He approached his best friend and business partner, Marcus Vane, near the grand fireplace. Witnesses described the exchange as urgent but not hostile. Julian told Marcus he needed to grab a specialized set of blueprints from his vintage Porsche to show a potential investor who had arrived late. "Don't start the speeches without me," Julian had called out, flashing that winning smile one last time. He walked out the heavy oak front doors and into the mist. He never came back. For 15 years, the prevailing theory was simple, tidy, and heartbreaking: a tragic accident. The police believed Julian, perhaps slightly tipsy from the toast and disoriented by the legendary Oak Haven fog, which was thicker than smoke that night, wandered too close to the cliff edge. One misstep on the slick, wet grass, and he would have plummeted 300 feet into the churning Pacific below. His body was never recovered, but that wasn't uncommon in Oak Haven. The riptides there are notorious. Locals call them the bone cleaners because they strip the ocean floor clean of debris, driftwood, and the dead. But accidents don't leave cryptic notes. Accidents don't have motives, and dead men don't send emails 15 years later. Part 2. The Ghostwriter. I arrived in Oak Haven 3 weeks ago, driving a rental sedan that smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon air freshener. I'm not a detective, nor am I the police. I'm Alara Vance, a journalist who specializes in cold cases that have gone stagnant, the stories the world has forgotten. Truth be told, I needed this story as much as it needed me. My career had hit a catastrophic slump after the botched coverage of the Detroit municipal scandal. I had trusted a source I shouldn't have, published too early, and faced a libel suit that nearly bankrupted my magazine. I was toxic in the newsroom. I was desperate for a win, for something clean and undeniable. I came because of an email I received on the anniversary of Julian's disappearance. It hit my encrypted inbox at 3 a.m. The subject line was blank. The body of the email contained only coordinates and a 4-word sentence: 34.22, negative 77.90. He didn't fall alone. The coordinates didn't lead to the cliffs. They led to a rusted, abandoned boathouse 3 miles south of the spire, deep in the salt marshes. When I checked into the Cliffside Inn, the atmosphere was suffocating. Oakhaven is the kind of town where everyone knows your business before you've unpacked your toothbrush. It's a place of peeling paint and shuttered storefronts, clinging to the edge of the continent like a barnacle. By breakfast the next morning, the waitress, a woman named Barb, with hair the color of steel wool and a uniform that had seen better decades, was already eyeing me suspiciously. "You're the writer," she said, not asking. She poured coffee that tasted like burnt hazelnuts and regret. "Hear about Julian." "Is it that obvious?" I asked, nursing the mug for warmth. The heating in the inn was practically non-existent. "People don't come here in October unless they're lost or digging up ghosts," she muttered, wiping the counter with aggressive strokes. "Let him sleep, honey. The ocean took him. That's the end of it. You stir up the silt. You're only going to catch mud." "Someone sent me a tip, Barb. Someone thinks it wasn't the ocean." Barb paused, the rag still in her hand. She looked out the window toward the lighthouse, looming in the distance like a tombstone. "Then that someone has a death wish. In this town, secrets are the only currency we have left." Part 3. The Widow in Waiting. I started with the survivors, the ones left behind in the wreckage of Julian's absence. Clara Halloway never married. She lives in a small, wind-battered cottage inland, teaching piano to children who likely don't practice enough. She's 41 now, but when I met her, she looked frozen in time. She wore a pale blue dress that seemed out of fashion, and her living room was a shrine to 2009. Photos of Julian were everywhere, on the mantel, the piano, the walls. He was happy, Clara told me, her hands trembling slightly as she poured tea into delicate china cups. The sound of the spoon clinking against the porcelain was the only noise in the house. People say he was stressed about the lighthouse project, that the pressure broke him, but they didn't know him. He was excited. He told me that night that our lives were about to become perfect. Did he seem worried, distracted? I pressed gently. "No," she insisted, her eyes filling with tears that didn't fall. He was radiant. He had this energy about him. The only odd thing was the argument. I leaned forward. "Argument?" "With Marcus. Earlier in the evening, before the party started, I was upstairs, but I heard raised voices in the study. Julian was shouting. I heard him say, 'I won't be a part of it, Marcus. It ends tonight.' When I asked him about it later, he just kissed me and said it was business, that Marcus was just being difficult." "Did you ask Marcus about it?" "Of course," she sighed. "He said they were arguing about the catering budget, but Julian wouldn't shout over canapes." "What do you think happened, Clara?" She looked at me, and for a moment, the fragile facade cracked. "I think he walked into the fog and saw something he wasn't supposed to." "I think the fog didn't take him, Ms. Vance. I think a person did." Part 4. The Architect of Grief. Marcus Vane didn't inherit Julian's charm. He inherited his workload, his clients, and his life. After Julian vanished, Marcus took over the architectural firm Thorne and Vane. He finished the lighthouse renovation, which stands today as a macabre monument to the missing man. Under Marcus's leadership, the firm had pivoted from artistic, community-focused projects to high-end, aggressive commercial developments. I met Marcus at his office in the city, a glass and steel contrast to the rotting wood of Oakhaven. He was a twitchy man, thin and sharp-featured, wearing a suit that cost more than my car but fit him poorly, as if he were shrinking inside it. He kept checking his watch. He didn't offer me water. "I've answered these questions 1,000 times, Marcus snapped, drumming his fingers on his mahogany desk. He went to the car. He slipped. It was a tragedy. Why are you digging this up now? Clara mentioned an argument, I said, watching his pupils. She heard Julian say, "It ends tonight." Marcus stiffened. Clara was emotional. She was a bride on her wedding eve. We debated materials. Julian was an artist. He wanted to use Italian marble for the lighthouse flooring. I was the businessman. I told him the budget wouldn't allow it. That was the extent of our conflict. I was trying to save him from bankrupting his own legacy. And the blueprints? The ones he went to get? Marcus hesitated, just for a split second. His eyes flicked to the window overlooking the harbor, then back to me. He never brought them back inside, so I assume they went over the cliff with him, along with the future of this firm, which I had to rebuild from the ground up. You benefited from his death, Mr. Vane. You became the sole partner. Marcus stood up, his face flushing a blotchy red. I lost my best friend. I carried the weight of his unfinished dreams for 15 years. Get out of my office. I left, but not before noticing the tremor in his hands as he reached for a glass of water. It wasn't grief, it was fear. Part 5. The Boathouse. I decided to follow the coordinates. It was time to stop asking questions and start finding answers. The boathouse was a rotting husk of timber, half swallowed by the marsh. It had been abandoned since the late 90s, the wood gray and slick with algae. The fog was rolling in again, thick and cold, obscuring the path. I had to use a crowbar to pry the side door open. The metal screamed in protest, a sound that made birds take flight from the nearby reeds. Inside, it smelled of mildew, gasoline, and decay. I searched for an hour, my flashlight beam cutting through the dust motes. I checked the loft, the boat slips, the rusted lockers, nothing but rat droppings and old fishing nets. I was about to leave, frustrated, thinking the email was a cruel prank, when I stepped on a loose board in the corner. It didn't creak, it thudded. I knelt down. The floorboards here were cleaner than the rest. Less dust. I used the crowbar to pry them up. Underneath wasn't a body but a heavy, waterproof pelican case. A diver's box. My heart hammered against my ribs as I undid the latches. Click, click. Inside the box were 3 things preserved in airtight silence. A set of blueprints for the Oakhaven lighthouse marked with red ink. A handgun, a .38 snub nose with the serial number filed off. A leather-bound journal. The journal belonged to Julian Thorne. I recognized the handwriting from the letters Clara had shown me. The last entry was dated November 14th, 2009, the day he died. I sat on the dirty floor and read, the beam of my flashlight trembling. Marcus knows. I found the accounts. He's been laundering money through the firm for the cartel in Portland. He thinks I'm too soft to do anything. He thinks I'm just the artist. He's wrong. I'm going to the police tomorrow. I have the bank records. I have the transfers. Tonight I have to pretend everything is fine. I have to smile and drink champagne and toast to a future I might not see. But if anything happens to me, if I fall, if I disappear, check the foundation. The concrete pours deep. He's insistent on overseeing the pour personally next week. Part 6. The Concrete Tomb. This wasn't an accident. It was a hit. The narrative constructed itself in my mind. Marcus Vane had been laundering drug money. Julian found out. Marcus killed him to keep him quiet and seized the firm to continue his operations. But I needed proof that couldn't be ignored. The journal was hearsay. The gun was untraceable. I needed the body. I took the journal to the local sheriff, a man named Miller who looked like he was 2 years past retirement age and held together by coffee and cynicism. He read the entry, his face paling beneath his tan. "We couldn't check the foundation," Miller said, his voice raspy. The lighthouse renovation was completed 6 months after Julian disappeared. They poured tons of industrial concrete into the base to stabilize it against the erosion. If Marcus put a body in there, it's entombed in 20 feet of solid rock. "We have to drill," I said. "This journal is probable cause. It's a deathbed declaration." It took 3 days to get the warrant. In that time, Marcus Vane went underground. His office was cleared out overnight. His house was empty. He had run. His flight was the final nail in the coffin of his innocence. The drilling began on a Tuesday. It was a spectacle. The whole town watched from behind the yellow police tape. Barb, the waitress, was there. Clara was there, supported by her aging father, looking like a ghost herself. The heavy machinery bored into the base of the lighthouse Julian Thorne had designed. The screech of diamond-tipped drills drowning out the ocean. I stood by the tape, notebook in hand, feeling a mix of triumph and nausea. I had done it. I had solved the mystery. At 4 p.m., the core sample came up. The forensic anthropologist, a woman from the state crime lab, sifted through the gray dust. She stopped. She pulled out tweezers, bone fragments, and scraps of black silk fabric and a crushed gold cufflink. The town let out a collective, horrified gasp. The mystery was solved. Marcus Vane had murdered his best friend, buried him in the foundation of his own legacy, and played the grieving partner for 15 years. A nationwide manhunt was launched for Marcus. I wrote my article. It was a sensation. The boy in the fog found. I was the hero who cracked the Oakhaven mystery. My editor was calling me the new Capote. But something nagged at me, a splinter in my mind. The email. He didn't fall alone. If Marcus killed Julian and buried him in the cement, who fell? Why that phrasing? And why did the email lead me to the evidence that incriminated Marcus so perfectly? If Marcus was the killer, why would he leave the journal and the gun in a boathouse he didn't own? Why keep the murder weapon? Why keep the confession? Why not burn it all? I went back to the boathouse the night before I was set to leave. I looked at the spot where I found the box. I shone my light on the floorboards. I noticed something I had missed in the adrenaline of the discovery. The dust pattern. The box had been buried under the floorboards, yes, but the dust on top of the floorboards, it was disturbed. Recently, within the last month. Someone hadn't hidden that box 15 years ago. Someone had planted it there recently, specifically for me to find. Part 7. The Man on the Ridge. I went back to the source. I tracked the IP address of the anonymous email again. My initial search had hit a wall of VPNs, bouncing from Singapore to London, but I had a friend in cybersecurity who owed me a life debt. He managed to peel back the layers, bypassing the spoofing. The email didn't originate from overseas. It originated from a public terminal in the Oakhaven Public Library. I went to the library, a quiet building that smelled of old paper and rain. I asked the librarian, a sweet old woman named Mrs. Gable, who had used Terminal 3 on October 14th at 3 a.m. "We aren't open at 3 a.m., she said, confused. "But sometimes the Wi-Fi reaches the parking lot. We leave it on for the students." I checked the security camera footage from the parking lot. Grainy black and white footage. A truck pulls up, an old beat-up Ford. A figure steps out. He's limping. He opens a laptop on the hood of the truck. He stands there for 2 minutes. Then he closes it and drives away. I froze the frame. I zoomed in on the license plate. It was mud-covered, but I got the first 3 letters. I ran them against local registrations for Ford trucks. It belonged to a Thomas Blackwood. Address, 442 Ridge Road. I drove up to the ridge. The road was treacherous, winding up the spine of the cliffs, away from the town. The house was a shack, really, isolated, overlooking the lighthouse from a distance like a watchtower. I didn't knock. I walked around the back. Through the grime-streaked window, I saw a man sitting in a worn armchair. He was watching the news, my news report about the manhunt for Marcus Vane. He turned. I gasped, stepping back. Half his face was ruined, burned, scarred. It looked like he had been dragged across asphalt at high speed. The skin a roadmap of pain. One eye was clouded over. But the other half, the sharp jawline, the classic nose, the piercing blue eye, I knew that face. I had stared at it in Clara's living room for hours. It was Julian Thorne. He wasn't dead. He wasn't in the concrete. I stepped on a twig. Crack. He heard it. He didn't run. He didn't reach for a weapon. He just walked to the door, opened it, and gestured for me to come in. "You're persistent, Alara," Julian said. His voice was gravel, damaged by smoke or screaming. It was the voice of a ghost. "You're supposed to be in the concrete," I stammered, stepping into the warmth of the shack. "We found the bones. We found the cufflink." "No," Julian said, closing the door against the wind. "That's Marcus." My brain stuttered. The world tilted on its axis. "What?" "Sit down. The whiskey is cheap, but it helps." Part 8. The Truth Beneath the Lies. "The journal was real," Julian began, pouring 2 glasses. His hands were scarred, the fingers stiff. "Marcus was laundering money, and I did find out. But I wasn't the noble hero you wrote about. I was a coward." He took a sip, grimacing as the alcohol hit his throat. "I confronted him that night, not to turn him in, but to beg him to stop. I was scared of the scandal. I was scared of losing the wedding, the reputation, the life." "What happened?" "Marcus laughed at me. He told me I was already implicated. He'd been forging my signature on the transfers for years. If he went down, I went down. I was the face of the company. The cartel would come for me first." Julian leaned forward, the firelight dancing on his ruined face, making the scars look like moving shadows. "He pulled a gun on me, that snub-nosed .38. He told me to get in his car, the Porsche. He said we were going for a ride to the cliffs. He was going to kill me and make it look like a suicide, a tragic fall due to stress." "But you're here," I whispered. We struggled in the car. He was driving fast, too fast for the fog. I grabbed the wheel, the gun went off, it hit Marcus in the stomach. The car swerved, hit the barrier, and we went over. The crash. That explained the scars. That explained the limp. "I was thrown clear into the jagged rocks below," Julian said. "Broken leg, broken ribs, face torn open, but alive. I crawled down to the wreck. The tide was coming in. The car was half submerged. Marcus was dead. The gunshot, the crash, he was gone." "And you swapped places?" I realized in that moment, lying in the freezing water, that Julian Thorne was a dead man walking. If I survived and went to the police, I'd be arrested for money laundering. If I didn't go to jail, the cartel would kill me for losing their money. There was no way out. Julian's good eye was cold, hard as flint. So I made a choice. I stripped Marcus of his clothes. I put my tuxedo jacket on him. I put my signet ring on his finger. I dragged him out of the water. It took hours. I carried him up the construction path to the lighthouse site. The foundation for the new retaining wall had been poured that afternoon. It was wet, deep, and waiting. I felt bile rise in my throat. "You buried him in your own monument." "I buried Marcus Vane, and I let Julian Thorne die with him. I took the cash from Marcus's wallet, stole some clothes from a laundry line, and disappeared. I spent 15 years living as a ghost, working cash jobs, staying off the grid, becoming Thomas Blackwood." "Why now?" I asked. "Why send the email? Why plant the evidence? You were free." Julian smiled, a terrifying expression on his ruined face. "I was safe, but then I saw him." "Who?" "The man you met, the man calling himself Marcus Vane." The room went silent. The wind howled outside. "That man isn't Marcus," Julian whispered. "That's Silas Vane, Marcus's younger, estranged cousin. He's a grifter, a con artist. He looks enough like Marcus to pass, especially since nobody in town paid much attention to the boring partner." "Wait!" I shook my head, trying to process the layers of deception. "You're saying the man running your firm for 15 years was an imposter?" Julian nodded. "Silas must have come to town looking for a handout, found Marcus missing, and saw an opportunity. He realized Marcus was gone and assumed his identity. He took over the firm. He took over the laundering operation. He's been living my life, spending my money, and continuing the crimes." "So you planted the evidence to frame Marcus?" "To frame the memory of Marcus," Julian corrected. "I needed the police to find the body. Once they identified the body in the cement as Julian Thorne, because of the ring and the clothes, they would hunt for the man they believe is Marcus." "But the DNA," I started. "They would match the body to Marcus's DNA." "They checked it against dental records," Julian said simply. "Marcus had perfect teeth, so did I. But I switched the dental files in the office archive before the party. I was paranoid back then. The body in the cement matches the records for Julian Thorne." My head was spinning. "So the police think Marcus killed you. They are hunting for Marcus Vane. And when they catch the man currently sitting in that office, Silas, he will be arrested for my murder." "But Silas didn't kill anyone." "Exactly." Julian leaned back, a look of dark satisfaction settling over him. "Silas will go down for a murder he didn't commit. He will be punished for stealing a life that wasn't his. The world thinks Julian is dead. The world thinks Marcus is a murderer. And I—" He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the lighthouse beam cutting through the fog. "I get to watch them all burn. It's poetic, isn't it? The man who stole my life gets destroyed by the death of the man whose life he stole." Part 9. The Final Echo. I left the cabin as the sun began to bleed through the gray horizon. I drove straight to the police station, but I didn't go in. I sat in the parking lot, the engine idling, the heater fighting the morning chill. I held the truth in my hands. If I told the sheriff the truth, Julian goes to prison for killing the real Marcus and desecrating a corpse. Silas goes free on the murder charge, though perhaps gets caught for fraud later. The cartel might come back to finish the job. If I stayed silent, Silas goes to prison for life for a murder he didn't commit. But he is a criminal who stole a life and laundered money. The real Marcus rests in the lighthouse, his grave marked by the very structure he tried to cheapen. And Julian, the victim, the survivor, the monster, he gets to live out his days in the fog, a ghost haunting the edges of the world. I looked at my notepad. I looked at the draft of my follow-up article. Justice Served, it was titled. I picked up my phone and dialed my editor. "Alara, did you find the source of the email? Is there more to the story?" I looked up at the lighthouse, blinking in the distance. One long flash. Too short. A warning. Or a goodbye. "No," I lied, my voice steady. "It was just a dead end. The email was a glitched, delayed send from the old server. The case is closed. Marcus Vane is guilty." "Great work, Alara. Come home. You're a star again." I hung up. I pulled the memory card from my dash cam, the one that had recorded my drive to the ridge. I snapped it in half. In Oakhaven, the fog claims things. It hides the sharp edges of the world. Sometimes it's better to let the fog keep its secrets. I put the car in gear and drove away, leaving the boy in the fog, the body in the concrete, and the imposter in the cell.